Wild Moon Sessions podcast. My name is Bexy and I am your host. Today we have Nikki Neervens from Amsterdam with us. I met Nikki a few years ago. Well, we've just figured out it was about 5 years ago, and it was actually at a friend's party. We actually started our relationship by talking about Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. So that kind of set the tone. One of my favorite all-time books. And absolute soul sister, just being united with Nikki. It's such a beautiful thing. And I wanted to invite her on this podcast because Nikki's been doing so much amazing work, and we massively vibe about she has her own podcast, which is beautiful, but it's also all based in conversation and listening. And I'm going to let Nikki tell you way more about it, but just the intentionality of what she's doing is so beautiful. And I think it has such a deep and valuable lesson for us all. So Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks for your really kind words. It's making me blush a little. Thanks. As you said, my name's Nikki. I make a podcast. I do make it in Dutch, but translated in English, the title is We Need to Talk. And it's basically about white privilege, systemic racism, and the decolonization of the Dutch history. So some intense subjects, but I think it's very important to talk about it with each other because it is a problem in our society that isn't spoken about enough, I reckon.
Yeah, that's so deep and actually so profound what you are doing. That's huge. And the reason why I wanted to get Nikki on today was to talk about this idea of talking and listening and this idea of hearing one another. Because I think actually the power of what you're doing is huge, because conversation can be so healing. And to be heard, seen, acknowledged is a human need.
Yeah. Yes.
So...
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially that somebody sees you and listens to you. And I do think when we talk about racism in general, it's quite often that people are they react when people tell them something instead of they listen to what that person has to tell them. So yeah, it's really nice that you kind of pick that out of the podcast as the essence of it, which I really like hearing it the way you describe it.
Well, I think that so for me, and this is something that we touched on one of the previous episodes with my friend Jodie, and Jodie does a lot of community work around sort of literacy and not literacy, but literature. So she finds a book and she talks about it, and there's intense topics in it. But the idea is that there's a conversation, there's an expression, there's a community surrounding it. And actually, I love the fact that you two have actually done you two so close together, because we've managed to get this together. It seems so synced, because actually it's the difficult conversations are the most important ones, I always find. And when two people can come together and be this open listening vessel for the other person, at the same time as knowing that they are heard, they are seen, they are acknowledged, actually it massively relaxes our nervous system, and it allows us to actually feel like we're not in survive mode, we're in thrive mode. And actually, I had an experience yesterday where a total stranger told me exactly who I was without really asking me very many questions. I was in a 20-minute conversation with him. And it came from actually a medical professional who I was not expecting this kind of thing from. And he gave me this profile, and I was like, oh. And then he started to talk to me about lots of different things. And I was like, wow, okay, I've said what I've needed to say, but this person's seeing me, acknowledging me, and hearing me bigger and better than I could ever have expected. I didn't expect to go in there and have this bigger conversation, which then had these massively rippling effects. And actually, when I had this conversation, after it, I felt just so relaxed that I went back to bed. I never do that. And I think even just being able to, like I say, be an honest witness for somebody and really hold that space is such a beautiful thing. And I think that is, for me, the fundamentals. Like, racism is such a huge and vast topic with so many experiences and so many there's a lot of diverse experiences, there's a lot of unifying experiences. And I mean, I don't know anywhere, I don't even know 1% of it, if that makes sense. And I enjoy being that person who can say that as well.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that's important. And I guess you opening those conversations allows for that dialogue as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I do think, by the way, it sounds like a beautiful experience you had yesterday.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
sounds really lovely. It kind of reminded me, I think we spoke about this the last time we spoke, but also about like the holding space. For me, for a long time, that was quite like an abstract concept, like what is holding space. But I do think when you generally sit down and listen to somebody and like give them the space to just like speak their mind is such like a beautiful thing to do. And yeah, that also, I feel like what we were talking about, like the having of conversations, but also this holding space, it also has a lot to do with safety. I feel that a person feels safe in your presence to like share without a fear of like being judged or being like, that somebody like swoops in the conversation and goes like, oh no, but this and that, like so definitely I feel like in these conversations, like making sure somebody feels comfortable and safe is such an important thing as well. Yeah, and then as for like the conversations also within the podcast, it also, once you start speaking about something, it's also easier for other people to speak up about it, I feel. Like ever since, so I started the podcast in the end of 2019, so about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And ever since, I've also noticed that it's way easier for other people to talk to me because I talk quite freely about like my white privilege or the racism I see in our society or the people I've spoken with, and then somebody else listens to the podcast and they come to me and they ask me questions and that sort of thing. So I think it's a really beautiful thing that just by having these conversations, I'm opening new conversations as well, and that's how it can kind of spread, I feel. Because I think it's a topic that is definitely present in like also like the collective consciousness basically. So I definitely also think that we all benefit from like speaking up about it, and as with all problems, I reckon. Yeah,
but I think it's particularly powerful, isn't it? It's about when you can empower a person or a section of society or a traumatized individual to be able to tell their story in some way. Actually, that's huge. And like you're talking about the safety and comfort, like we absolutely, if we feel on edge, we are less likely to be fully ourselves. We're less likely to relax in other people's company. There's a lot of people have social anxiety, and that's how it manifests. And I know that because I've had social anxiety I had social anxiety for a lot of my life. And actually to know where it comes from and to be able to talk about it and to be able to feel held and know that you aren't going to be judged, like you've said, or there's not an ulterior motive to it, or there's not some sort of I always feel like people can jump on bandwagons and jump off and do it for their own gain, but actually and I find that a little bit frustrating, I'm not going to lie, because it's about those deep and meaningful conversations, isn't it? It's about not just doing things for lip service. It's really about understanding that whatever your most profound experience in life is, consider that every single person on this planet has all of that.
Yeah.
And when you talk about collective consciousness, that's huge. That's that's 7.7 billion, like probably more now. I've not even checked the stats recently.
Yeah.
So, you know, and racism is a part of that. And it's a huge and it can be a unifying experience, but it can also be an alienating experience for people. So I think it takes so much courage to talk about your story, but also courage to do what you're doing, Nikki, and being able to say, actually, I know my white privilege and I want to be able to talk about this in a bigger way, because actually communication and compassion, growing compassion, can be done when you are listening to a person with you know, like sometimes when things feel faceless and big, it can feel inaccessible.
Yeah, definitely. I also think that's, you know, like in that way, sometimes people really stick to like their own little bubble. And I think, you know, like that is a part of having conversations as well, like going out of your bubble and getting to know new perspectives. So it isn't that alienating, because it can be just like your neighbor or somebody that is like a little outside your bubble. And then for me, it always really comes back to this realization that we're all just human beings and we all have similar experiences. And, you know, like if you just connect to that side, nobody is really that alienated. Like everybody is similar, of course. Which always, I don't know, it just makes, just feels really good and really connected, because you all just see each other as like another human being, and you're all just here together trying to make the best out of it. And I think that's, I don't know, that connection that comes through conversation is just something that feels really beautiful to me, but at the same time really energizing as well, like that connection that you make with people. And I think everybody has that. Everybody has like a person or something that they speak to and they feel this huge connection. And I've also kind of learned that it's also like a muscle you train. Like the more people you talk to, like you can find a connection with everybody. Like, and with somebody it will be about like Eckhart Tolle, and with other people it will be about, you know, like food or pillows, or I don't know, whatever your interest is. Like it's actually not that hard to make a connection with somebody.
Yeah, and I think, you know what, that's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment, because actually I believe it's what we're here for. You know, the companionship that you can actually find in this life, in amidst you know, call it society, call it all of these sort of narratives that happen around it. There's so much companionship, and actually, like you say, that muscle, and exercising a muscle is so important, to be able to say, you know what, I can sit here and I don't feel the need to have to express my opinion, or I don't feel the need to have to jump in on this and make it all about me, or, you know, I don't need to share all of the knowledge that I have on it, even if I am special, you know, even if I'm a specialist in it. I don't need to feel triggered. And I think actually a lot of it comes from ego, when we think about why people can't disconnect themselves from somebody else's feelings. You know, it can also be a huge I want to help, you know, but it can also be I need to be heard. And I think that, you know, like, for example, Twitter is a huge manifestation of that. It's just lots of people wanting to be heard constantly. I'm not saying that that's positive or negative, but therefore that informs the whole experience of being on there. So you're always going to find a diverse set of opinions or a diverse set of expressions on there, and they're not, and people can be quite combative about it.
Yeah, definitely on Twitter.
I guess you only have so many words, so you know. But I guess for me, that's where the problem lies. The problem is that you don't have to be combative at all. And really, if you feel the need to be, then why? And I think this is a huge growth point. And the fact that we connected on Eckhart Tolle and now we're talking about this on a podcast does not surprise me. Because I mean, Eckhart Tolle is all about the growing awareness, isn't it? Growing awareness of yourself, being a watcher of your own mind, understanding, you know, your own sort of pain bodies and how you react with that with the world. And actually what you are initiating, really, because you are being the initiator of these conversations for it to build bridges and to become a beautiful, beautiful, illustrious network of conversation, really. And actually the single impact of you making this conversation and the ripple effects are ginormous. How does that make you feel?
I love the way that you explain it. Sometimes I'm just like, I just do what I do because I like it. But then you're explaining it in these really beautiful words. And I'm like, geez, yeah, that is what I do as well. But yeah, no, I do feel, I always say this about the podcast. Like, it's like every small conversation that happens through this podcast is just like another little thing that helps like to the solution of this problem. And I feel like it operates on different levels as well, because like on a very practical level we can talk about like racism and somebody's experiences, and then I think on a deeper level you have that conversation and connection, and then on a deeper level you have that ultimate connection and that we're all just like human beings, and then on a deeper that it's like it's all one being. And I feel like also this podcast is in that sense just like a vehicle to create more connections between people. So I do feel that even though it's just like like the other day, a friend of mine texted me and she's just like, why can't I say the N-word anymore? And then I just briefly explained that to her about like the context and like the history. And then I was just like, well, and she's like a teacher in a school. So I was like, oh, it's really good that she actually, like that we had this conversation and now she can spread that again. So I do feel in that sense like the podcast is kind of like a vehicle, but I feel every small conversation is just a win. Yeah, definitely.
And what you've just mentioned about, desensitizing or de-weaponizing words and understanding them and the context, and like even those small process of being able to make something not a taboo conversation and just normal, natural conversation. Do you feel like that's becoming more normal? Is that something that you found as a result of your podcast?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question once more?
Yeah, so like take it like, say for example, I had a question for you and I came to you and asked you a question. Is it the fact that that isn't a taboo area of conversation now, where people are like, actually, I'm just going to ask, and it's okay to ask. It's okay to not know, basically.
Yeah, I do think, and that is also like, that is again a sort of white privilege. White people feel more safe to ask me like, oh, why can't I say the N-word anymore? Which is also a good thing, because you shouldn't ask like black or brown people that question anymore, because I think by now there's enough resources to know. Yeah. So I do like it that it feels more safe for white people to ask another white person this question, which I think is a really good thing. And I definitely believe like we should talk about like a lot of stuff. Like I don't really believe in taboos that much, personally. That also means like I do sometimes like to be the rebel one. Like I know when I used to work in this restaurant, and like all the staff like cooking were basically all men, and I just very bluntly would talk about them, about like my period and stuff like that, and they would sometimes be like really disgusted. I'm like, come on, like it's a very normal thing. But I do feel like sometimes when I know there's a group of people that for example, periods with some men are still a taboo topic, and then I deliberately start talking about it, though, because I do think it shouldn't be a taboo. And there comes in a slightly rebel side. I'm like, well, I feel everybody should just openly talk about this. Because I do think that's also such like a thing of society, that some things are made taboos and then are upheld for, like, I feel, no reason. Just makes things more difficult, I feel.
Do you think that that's, and this is kind of a big question, but do you think that that's linked to the way that our media portrays everything and kind of keeps things in neat boxes so that it's easier? Do you think that it's something to do with global media and the way that they represent these ideas, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also to like, we have a sort of society and it needs to be upheld, and I think media definitely plays like a very big part in it, just as like politics does, and economics, but media definitely upholds these things as well. And on the other hand, you do have like this side that it's easy for people to compartmentalize things, because as human nature it's easier. But yeah, I do feel definitely, or maybe that could also be now that I'm a bit more of age, and, well, not that I'm that old, but like older, to understand the world a bit better. Like, I do see there's also like loads of media outlets that do cover like the not mainstream news. And there's so many good ones that you can get your news from, instead of just like the big ones that kind of only portray like the I don't know how you say it. Well, not per se the news I would watch.
Yeah, no, I understand. It really, what you were saying then, it really reminded me of an author in the UK called George Monbiot, and he actually talks about the politics of belonging. Because he actually believes that loneliness is like one of the biggest topics of our time. In terms of humanity, it's just such a huge topic.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying about this, about everything that we've discussed today, just the idea of creating a place where people can belong and talk and express, you're actually doing that. You're creating this ripple effect of belonging, because people can feel safer in their expression, they can feel safer in themselves, they can feel safer that actually there are people that care. There are people that want to create like a really like equal experience in every sense. And I know that sometimes we can get caught up in society and how it's built to serve certain people and all of this sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that that's not real, because it is. However, when you actually boil it down to your connections, the people that you know, actually that's your world in lots of ways. And how can you empower that to become a place of belonging for different people and different identities? And, it really is the meaning of inclusivity, isn't it? And taking somebody out of like you say, it's not alienating if you can connect with somebody and actually we all want to. And I have to say, I've had periods in my life where I felt too traumatized to connect with people about what I've been through, and almost too shamed as well. Lots of different emotions that are attached to it. And actually, as you build yourself up and you become the person that you always are, really, it's just covered by different things. You can really begin to unveil the depths of the compassion, the companionship that you can find. And I count myself as really, really lucky, because I have so many people that I can talk to like this, Nikki. Like you are a really special human being doing special human things, and that's why I want to share it with people, because actually, if this inspires somebody to be able to talk about their story, to be able to ask questions that maybe they're a little bit uncomfortable about not knowing. Actually, that's a huge step, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, and it's just
huge.
Beautiful. Like when I listen to you, it operates on so many layers, and you can make it like super worldly and big and like all inclusive, but you can also make it like very tiny, small, and to very close to your heart and your world. And I think that's the beauty maybe of life as well, like the expansion and then going back in, and then just like it, I always feel a bit like an accordion, you know, like you stretch it out and then you go back in, and you
I love
just
that.
the visual I have in my mind when we talk about this. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do think you can make it as big or as small as feels right for you at the moment. And definitely what you said as well, like there's times in your life where you maybe need to figure out some stuff for yourself before you can connect to somebody else, and that's completely fine as well. I feel like for me a main thing is curiosity, like being really curious towards another person, but also towards yourself, like to really listen. Just like in the spirit of this conversation about deep listening, I think quite often for me personally, I can't really listen to somebody because I'm generally curious to who that person is, what moves them, what triggers them, what they love, what they don't love, and also towards myself. Sometimes, like definitely still a human being, so still sometimes listening to myself is a bit harder to like know what you generally want and to which voice in your head is best to listen. I recently learned something about it, which is quite helpful for me. Reading this book, it's called Tantra Illuminated. It's about like Tantra, and then not like in the Western perspective, like all about sex, but more the whole spirituality and lifestyle behind it. And it said like, listen to the voice that is most quiet, because that's the truth, because the truth doesn't have to argue. And I thought that was so beautiful, because like sometimes you need to like make a decision and you're like, okay, I can do this and that, and then for some options like your brain really goes, yes, you have to do this because this and that. And then in that book I read that and it was like, oh, the quietest voice, I don't know, it just kind of clicked for me and made sense.
Yeah, that's total serenity, isn't it, inside, like this little I love that. Yeah, that's so, it reminds me of a little card that I have that says, only in still waters can an image be reflected in perfection.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that really really reminds me of that's beautiful. That's so, and I think that's, you know, building this awareness of being able to listen to yourself, it actually in a deep way builds it builds like a different kind of energetic resonance with yourself, you know.
Yeah.
Rather than feeling like you are chasing, having to do, you can be and act from your being.
Yeah.
And I think that that's beautiful. I think to be able to do that, and even if it's you sitting and listening deeply in nature, all of nature is you are nature. And actually, if you have an answer that comes out when you're in nature, amazing, you know.
Yeah, this really makes me want to go to the forest after this talk.
Sit with your sentient beings and you being the sentient being and mirror it all back to you. Yeah, I mean, deep listening, this has been such a beautiful conversation on deep listening. Nikki, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your energy and your wisdom and just the way that you express it. I think it's really a lovely thing to be able to empower and chat about. And I definitely would love to listen to an English translation of yours.
Yeah, well, I might make an English episode sometime soon.
Yeah,
that'd
be amazing. Yeah, for
sure. I would love to have you listen to one.
So where can everybody find you if they want to come and find you? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they come and ask you any questions? Or
Well, you can come and ask me questions at my Instagram is probably best. That's
Okay.
at Nikki Neervens.
I'll pop that link in.
Yeah, and the podcast is in Dutch, but it's called Moeten Praten. So if you type that in on Instagram or Spotify or Apple or any one of those, you'll find it. But yeah, hopefully an English version sometime soon as well.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it'll come in good time, good time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for what you do, though, Nikki. It's really special to have you on. And if you do have any questions or comments, please do get in touch with Nikki. And if you have any questions or comments on deep listening and how you can cultivate it, for sure, just leave them in the comments below. I just want to say thank you for your energy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And if you have enjoyed the content from today's podcast, you can now support this podcast via Patreon. You can go on there and become a patron. There's going to be monthly donations to causes all around the world. And for a price of a coffee, you can have community surrounding all of these conversations too. So make sure that you go and subscribe and support if you love all of this good, lovely juiciness that we're putting out there. But thank you so much, Nikki. Thank you for being here. Thank you, listeners. Thank you for you, and have an awesome, awesome day.
Thank you for having me. Bye.